Hey y'all, my name is Oriafe. I'm a third year medical student. Today was actually my first day of third year. And today I'm going to be telling y'all about medical school essentials for first and second year because I feel like the list is pretty similar. And I'm going to be letting y'all know what y'all must have, what you can maybe have, and what you absolutely do not need and should not spend your money on. I feel like I have enough experience to tell y'all this, and I hope this helps y'all get prepared for your M1 or possibly M2 year. So with no further ado, I'm gonna just get right into it. I'm gonna start off with the things you absolutely do not need. I don't have them, you don't need them, especially not for your first 2 years. So the first thing I wouldn't say you need would be physical textbook copies. I remember especially during my M1 year, I literally can't name a single textbook I would study from, except maybe an anatomy atlas, but even the anatomy atlas I would have a PDF of and I would barely use it anyway. And I know like in our anatomy lab, they had physical copies. So it's like usually if there's something you actually need, the school will have it. Well, it does depend on your school, but I know my school at least had those things. And I didn't buy any physical copies of any textbooks throughout my entire first 2 years. The second thing I wouldn't say you need is a calculator. I know many of you would probably already have this from high school and college, but in medical school, at least in my experience, if you need a calculator for an exam, it'll be embedded into the test. I wouldn't say you should go out and spend $100 on a new calculator, because with the math stuff in medical school, it's more about knowing the formula than it is being able to work with a whole bunch of numbers. The next thing you do not need would be super niche physical exam equipment. And what do I mean by that? For example, you don't need an ophthalmoscope, which is what you use to check the back of your eye, like your retina, the red reflex. And you also don't need an otoscope, which is what you use to look inside your ear. Things like that, I don't think you need, especially not as an M1 or M2. And I'm not saying that you don't use them in school, but usually the school will provide them. The only thing I would say maybe you might want to get would be a neuro kit. I personally, again, do not have it, but I know that during my second year of medical school, I did have to borrow one from my friend to practice for my neuro examination. But in my actual exam, they did have things like the tuning fork, the reflex hammer. They had them laid out already. I am going to buy some of these things for third year because they're things I might be using routinely, but in general, I don't think they're necessary, especially not in your preclinical years. The last thing that you do not need would be a suture kit. If you want to practice suturing, I'm sure many of the organizations at your school, especially the surgical interest group, will have some different workshops for suturing, but I wouldn't say it's something that's necessary for you to have in your preclinical years. So that's all for the things you absolutely do not need. Next are the things that you can maybe get. Some of these things I have, some of them I don't, but it does depend on your preference and what your budget is. So the first thing on the maybe list is an iPad. I'm literally reading my script for this video on my iPad right now. And if you get an iPad, I also suggest getting the Apple Pencil along with it. And it doesn't have to be an iPad. It can be any tablet of your choice. But I personally, in M1, I would use it to take notes on the lecture. I had this app called GoodNotes where I can import the PDF of my lecture and take notes on the actual slides so I can highlight what the professor was saying and things like that. And in my M2 year, I'm mostly self-taught, and I would have my laptop and I would play a video. Let's say I'm watching Pathoma or Boys and Beyond. I'll play the Pathoma video, and then on my iPad on GoodNotes, I would have the Pathoma book PDF, and I'll be actively taking notes on that. I know this one is the iPad Pro. I don't think it's necessary to have the iPad Pro, but I feel like any tablet will do. And the reason I recommend it personally is because I don't like carrying a bunch of notebooks and folders anymore. I left my notebook and folder days in college. It's nice to have everything in one device and I can search for different things. But if you can't afford to get an iPad or you don't want to get an iPad, you don't think it's your style, another thing on the maybe list would be paper, notebooks, binders, but that really does depend on your style. I don't think in medical school anyone is gatekeeping how you take notes, so do whatever floats your boat. The next thing on my maybe list would be a little notebook that you can use during your clinical skills meal sessions. In the front of it, the sheet ripped out, but I have like my old carts, my sweet peas. You can't see it. Let me show you. I just had like the mnemonics that we use. This is old carts. Family history is 4 generations. Past medical history is Maddie's. Social history is sweet peas. These are the mnemonics that we use while taking a comprehensive history. And the reason I put that in the maybe list is because for clinical skills, I do know some people prefer to use their iPads, but my iPad is, I think it's 11 inches. It's the smaller version that you can get of the iPad Pro. But even though it's small, I wouldn't say it's small enough. So it's really nice to have this. It's really light, fits right in my white coat pocket easily. My iPad can also fit, but it's not fitting easily. Does that make sense? And during my second year of medical school, that's when they were really teaching us how to do different physical exams. So I would take notes on exactly what they're telling us to do. That way, when I practice and review, I have a reference guide. And I also use this like during preceptorship when I'm seeing patients. So it's really good to just have a quick reference and have all of your clinical growth and information in one little space. I bought a new one of these notebooks for my M3 year because this one is running out of space. But depending on what your style is, I'd recommend this. The next thing on my list would be a nice ergonomic chair, especially if you're somebody who prefers to study in your own home. I think that's a really nice thing to have in your apartment. You can't be sacrificing your back for the sake of medical school. Depending on your style of studying, that's something you may want to consider investing in. The next thing on my maybe list would be a whiteboard and dry erase markers, or you could just get dry erase markers. I know a lot of my classmates, they just have a pack of dry erase markers that they carry around with them, and my school has a bunch of different study rooms in it, and a lot of them have whiteboards so you can draw things out. I know some people like to get the big whiteboards that you can roll out on a wheel. Personally, I'm just good with this little handheld. This can fit in my backpack whiteboard. I usually write my plan for my exam weekends or what I want to study on this whiteboard, or like if I'm doing something with math, I'll do it. And when I was studying for step 1, I would use this as my scratch paper. That way, you know, I'm not wasting paper or anything like that. I'd recommend having it, but I don't think it's an absolute necessity. The next thing on the maybe list would be subscriptions, and I'm talking about things like UWorld, QBanks, Amboss. And the reason I say that, I don't say you don't need it, but I'm saying hold off on buying it because chances are your school's gonna pay for it. For example, my school didn't give us UWorld until second year, but during first year, we still had a QBank that was called Exam Masters that was provided through the school. Things like Osmosis that was provided through the school. I got my Kaplan provided through the school. You know, there's so many things that a lot of universities provide that you don't have to pay for, so don't jump the gun and buy things before you need to buy them. Also, like, free trials are your best friend. If there's something you're considering investing in, definitely try it out. Or like if an upperclassman has first aid, they might be able to give it to you. So general rule of thumb, don't pay for anything unless you absolutely have to pay for it and you actually think you'll get value out of it. The next thing on the maybe, which I did already kind of touch on, was a neuro kit. I personally do not have one. I did have to borrow one, and I'm not going to go in depth on that again because I already kind of touched on it. The next thing on my maybe list would be a blood pressure cuff. I'm pretty sure I only had to use it like a few times during M1 and then like once during M2. And my medical school's clinical skills center does have blood pressure cuffs embedded into the rooms. And also to practice, you know, you might need an external one that's portable. I remember I just borrowed my friend's to practice taking blood pressure. So the reason I'm putting that in the maybe list is because at one point I did need one, but as we can see, as I'm standing as an M3, I do not own one. So is it absolutely necessary? That's debatable. The next thing on my list would just be a lock, especially during the M1 year, during the anatomy lab session. It's just nice to have a good lock to keep your items safe. I personally use a combination lock, but a regular padlock works just fine as well. The next thing and the final thing on the maybe list would be a portable charger. And honestly, I just say that because it's something that's nice to have, but I know I have one, but I literally don't know where it is. And I find that most places I find myself, especially during the preclinical years, I have outlets available. Our lecture halls have outlets. My bedroom has outlets. Most of the study areas have outlets. So it's like it wasn't absolutely necessary as a preclinical student, but I did end up purchasing a new one for my M3 year because I'm probably going to be on the go more often, but it's something to consider. Woo, y'all. Okay, it's time to finally move into the must-haves. You absolutely must buy these for medical school. The first thing would be a handy dandy laptop. This one is the 2018 version of the MacBook Air. I've had it for going on 4 years now, but you don't need a MacBook. Any laptop will do. The reason I say an iPad is a maybe and a laptop is a must is because a lot of schools use softwares to take exams and quizzes called Exemplify. My school personally does not allow us to use the app for Exemplify. We do have to use it on our desktop or laptop computer. So essentially what I'm saying is if you just bring your iPad to school and you got a quiz that day, you're essentially screwed. But even aside from that, I do, really like having a laptop as like a bigger screen. Like I told you, my setup, especially during M2, was watching a video on my laptop and then taking notes on my iPad. And that's what I would also do with lectures if I was watching a recorded lecture during M1. Also, if I wanted to just type notes on the PowerPoint, I would usually use my laptop as opposed to my iPad because I just felt that to be more convenient. So yeah, that's something I strongly recommend getting if you don't have one already. And if you already have one, if it functions enough, you probably don't need to get a brand new laptop because there isn't really much special that you have to do. The next must-have for medical school would be some headphones. These ones are the Back Bay Tempo 30 in rose gold. These are just, wireless earbuds. I also happen to have a pair of AirPods, and some people in medical school prefer to get noise-canceling headphones. But I feel like any sort of wireless earbud that you can use for both your phone, your iPad, your MacBook or laptop, because oftentimes you're going to find yourself, maybe if you want to study in the library or in a study room or in a coffee shop or anything like that, you're going to need to have those headphones. So yeah, any old pair of headphones should do. The next thing that's a must-have, especially for M1, is a lab coat. I do not have mine with me because I threw that John away because I got so much muck and grime on it. Y'all, listen to me clearly. I am not talking about your white coats. White coat, lab coat, not the same thing. Your white coats are for like clinical scenarios, and your lab coats are for anatomy lab that you can get dirty. And I usually get them in a longer version. Chances are you'll have one of these from undergrad if you had to do biology lab, chemistry lab, things like that. You can bring whatever lab coat you'd like to the anatomy lab. I really like to wear them over my scrubs. That way my scrubs aren't getting too musty. So yeah, I would say that is a must have. And speaking of scrubs, that is the next must-have on my list. In your preclinical years, I wouldn't say you need that many scrubs. Maybe just having 2 or 3 pairs should do. But I mostly use scrubs for anatomy lab during M1. For clinical scenarios, for the most part, my school required us to dress professionally, which means like something like what I'm wearing now. Not scrubs, but like business casual. And during M2, I would wear scrubs if I was doing volunteer work or something like that. I feel like you don't really need to have too many, but having a few is important and is a must-have. And speaking of professional clothing, that is the next must-have for medical school. It's crazy how everything is just flowing together. But yes, you do need to have some business casual and business professional wear. I remember for my orientation for M1, we were required to dress up in business wear. And also in my orientation for M3, which I am currently going through, you do need to have business casual and business professional, as well as just conferences and things like that. It's good to have a cool, at least at like minimum 5 to 10 outfits on hand. Your big girls, your big boys, it's time to dress professionally. The next must-have would just be any water bottle, especially if you're sitting in lectures for a long time. It's really important to stay hydrated and take care of yourself, which is why I'm putting this on the must-have list. The final must-have is your handy dandy stethoscope. Personally, I have the Littman Cardiology 500, I think, something like that. Let me double check. I was way off, y'all. The name of my stethoscope is the Littman Cardiology 4. I was coming up with any type of name. But yeah, the stethoscope is something that you do actually need during both M1 and M2. In M1, you need it to listen to blood pressure with the blood pressure cuffs. And in M2, you're gonna need this for your lung exams, your heart exams, your gastrointestinal exams. You're gonna need a stethoscope. I think you can get any, but personally, I chose to invest in a high quality one just because this is something that I'm probably going to just keep for the rest of my life. And I'm like, you know what? Let me just buy the best quality and keep it. I think I got it for around $100. Quick tip while using your stethoscope, I'm just gonna give y'all quick tutorial. Make sure that these things are pointing in towards your nose when you put them on. So don't have it like this. Have it like this. And then this is the diaphragm, the bigger part. The smaller part is called the bell. You use the diaphragm to do things such as listening for breath sounds and listening to high frequency sounds. You use the bell for listening to low frequency sounds, such as listening to an artery or something like that, listening for bruits. And you'll learn all about those more when you start your medical school journey. Okay, y'all, so that concludes this video. I really do hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it helpful. If you're already in medical school and you have anything that you should add to the list, please comment it down below. And if there's anything in the video that you disagree with, maybe I said it's a maybe, but you think it's a must-have, let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video or you found it helpful, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe. I'll catch y'all in the next one.